Hey everyone, Michael here. I wanted to welcome you to the first session of Spirituality 101. The reason I'm doing this is because I've been doing life coaching now for over a month professionally. And while I expected to be talking to people about mindset and transformation, which is exactly what I signed up for, there is a rather large number of people who kind of secretly, in a hushed tone, ask me about my spiritual practice. And what that says to me is that there is a need, or there's at least a hunger out there to learn more about this. And I think at a collective level, we are awakening. And so what I wanted to do is put out these videos simply as a way to put this out there so that people can find it without them having to, ask me. Although if you do want to talk to me about it, it is literally one of my favorite subjects. I'm happy to talk about spirituality. I'm happy to talk about ideas and brainstorm. And, by no means do I have all the answers. I am learning just as much as you are. But if I'm, 2 steps ahead on the journey, then I'm happy to help in any way I can. So to that end, I wanted to talk today about the first question I always ask people is, who are you? And, the ways we can identify ourselves usually are within a very limited range. And what I want to share is that you're a lot more than you think you are. So without further ado, let's get into it. I have 2 rules. I just want you all to know that I'm here to teach, not to preach. So nothing that I'm saying here now is, I'm having the most incredible deja vu right now. Whoa. Nothing that I'm saying here now is meant to be the gospel truth. What I want to do is simply share what I've learned so far on my journey. And what I highly recommend is take what you like, leave what you don't. And if anything causes any questions within you, by all means, please, there is so much material out there from some fabulous teachers out in the world doing amazing things. There's books, there's YouTube videos. I'll put some of them at the end in the resources for you to look up. But honestly, guys, all the stuff I learned of myself and through other teachers and books and other people out there who have been kind enough to share with me their personal journeys as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into who you really are. I have some slides here. So when I ask people, who are you? Most times they will say that they are their name. I'm Michael, I'm gay, I'm a man, I'm Canadian, and all these other things that we use to describe ourselves. And that is our social identity. So we call it the persona. That's who you are. That's how others see you. So obviously it makes sense that that's how you see yourself. And then if I say, okay, I'm digging further with this person, I say, okay, go beyond that. What else are you? Go beyond that. They'll say, okay, well, I guess I'm a human and, I'm my body. And that makes sense. We are definitely our bodies and we are living in this body. So it makes a lot of sense that we identify with it. But then I say, okay, well, what happens if you lose your limbs in some kind of accident? Are you less of who you are, or are you still you? And so they start thinking about it and they say, okay, fine. Then I guess I'm my brain, I'm my mind, because, you can't live without your brain. And they'll say, okay, yeah, that's it. That's what I am. I'm my mind. And so we've now moved to the mental stage. And then I'll challenge that and say, okay, but what happens if you've lost consciousness, or think of all the people that are in a coma? Does that mean that they cease to be who they are once they're in the state of a coma? And at this point in the day, the person's really angry and they say, fuck you, man. Like, I just wanted to go for some drinks and now you're grilling me on who I am. What I believe we really are is energy. And that energy is what I would call our spirit. And that is the energy that animates us. So the truth is we're a combination of all of those things. We're a combination of mind, body, and spirit. We are definitely one in this body. We are our mind. We are the thoughts we think. But more than that, and I would say the most important, is that we are the spirit that animates all of these things, because without it, we are a pile of flesh, not doing anything. Okay, so let's go into what is the spirit. It comes from the Latin word spiritus, which comes from the Greek word pneuma, which means breath. And Spirit is the hard part with this word in our language is that it comes with so much baggage. And this is why I think people shy away from the word spirituality or spirit in general. There's a lot of religious undertones, which for me, as growing up Catholic, that was very hard for me to sort of put that aside while I went on my own personal spiritual journey. But spirit is not a thing. It's not something you can see. Well, not with your eyes anyway. And it's not something that's made of matter. As I said, it is an animating energy. It is what makes you alive. It is what makes your heart beat. It is what makes your lung breathe. It is what makes your thoughts think. And it's the same energy that turns a seed into an oak tree. It's the same energy that turns a little baby into a full-grown man. Okay, so it is, like I said, not visible to the five senses. And by the way, just so we all know, like, we have more than five senses. This is very common knowledge, but we get taught in school for some reason. I think teachers just got lazy and said, okay, we're going to stop at five. But look it up online. There's a lot more than five senses. And the other thing with spirit is, and this is from Eckhart Tolle, one of my favorite teachers, is as soon as we try to identify it with a thought, we can't identify it. It is not identifiable by thought. It is, in fact, the observer of the thoughts. And as soon as we try to label it, we lose it. Spirit is awareness in the present moment. So it's not something in the past, in the future. It is what is at the very core, beneath all of our thoughts, in our very breath. It is nothing and it is everything at the same time. Now, I know that's going to mind bend for a lot of people who maybe aren't used to this material. So let's talk about the illusion of self. So I can understand if you don't believe this, because this is new, and for many people it might be abstract. So it's not accessible to the imagination if you've never been made aware of it. And what it is it's spirit is hidden under all the layers of dense thoughts we have. And we have so many thoughts. We have automatic thoughts. We have the voice in our head. We have sort of that inner dialogue. We have thoughts about ourselves, thoughts about the world. We have a lot of thoughts going on. I think scientists say between 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And spirit is the small, still voice under all of that, which is why it so often gets buried. So obviously for us, it's a lot easier to identify with the body and the mind. We can look at our hands, we can look at our feet, we can look in the mirror and say, okay, that's who I am. I'm that guy looking back at me. I'm the thoughts that I'm thinking. They're very real, they're very tangible, they're very accessible to us. But when we believe only what we see with our eyes, we limit what we see. And our eyes perceive the external world around us and translate that. But we have another eye, a third eye, which we'll get to in a different video, that is our vision into the more intuitive realm. So the way I like to think about spirit, and this was taught to me by Marianne Williamson, another one of my favorite teachers, you are a lamp, and spirit is the electricity that makes it shine. And so the lamp will look in the mirror and see itself. Okay, that's who I am. But it doesn't understand what is making it shine. And that is what spirit is. And it's invisible and it runs through us. And that same spirit runs through all different kinds of lamps. And so the lamp is simply the conduit for the energy. Okay. So for all you science folks, you're saying, okay, but where does science fit into this? This is just woo-woo stuff. So one of my favorite teachers, another one, is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I highly recommend looking into his stuff. And so what I've learned from him is that the duality of science and religion started in the 17th century with René Descartes. He was the I think, therefore I am guy. And what happened was he was looking to do some research on the body, but the mind was a bit too complicated and there are too many variables in it to try to understand it. So he just said, okay, you know what? We're going to decide to stick with the body as anything from the neck down kind of thing, and the mind will leave that with the philosophy and with mystics and with the religious institutions. So it wasn't until the 19th century, late 19th century, that really scientists began looking at the study of the brain, and that was psychology, and that was in Germany, and I think it was 1870s. And then Einstein came around with his E equals MC squared theory, and what that did was it kind of threw the foundation of what we had believed about physical science uh, kind of into a bit of a disarray, because previously mind and body were separate just as energy and matter were separate. They're two different things. But with E equals MC squared, it basically said that energy and matter are in fact interchangeable, and they are two forms of the same thing. So ever since then, there's been a whole bunch of greater study into the field of quantum physics and more recently epigenetics. And I highly recommend, if anyone out there is science focused and science brained, look into this stuff, because the way I see it, science and spirituality are two sides of the same coin, and they're marching slowly towards each other. And there's a cute little illustration there, which is how the way I see it. So I don't spend a lot of time arguing with scientists, and I love science because a good scientist will know that there's always room for possibility, that the truth is never absolute. And so they're always willing to experiment, and there's some really interesting experiments going on right now with consciousness, and the stuff that was traditionally for the spiritual world. I believe they're coming together, and I believe it's coming together really quickly. Okay, so as promised, here are some resources. As always, just use the internet. Literally, Google and YouTube will find all kinds of things. And then, of course, just double check where it's coming from. Some books that I highly recommend are The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, anything by Eckhart Tolle for that matter. Sam Harris's Waking Up is a great one because I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Harris, but he is an atheist. And so when he wrote this book about spirituality, it raised a lot of eyebrows. And that's why the subtitle here is A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. And so this was a fundamental book for me because I too don't identify as religious, but I do completely identify as spiritual. And then finally, as I mentioned, Joe Dispenza. He has a lot of books out there, but this one is, I think, his first one. And so it's a good place to start. But yeah, there's definitely a few. I have one called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which I also highly recommend. So guys, that's it for me. If you have any questions, then please let me know. If you have any comments, please let me know. And I'm happy to hear from you. Thanks, guys.